Ryan Caldwell never imagined that a secret with Ananya Patel would destroy everything he had built, and ignite one of the most shocking revenge plots the hospital had ever seen. Dr. Ryan Caldwell lived a life that many would consider ideal, yet underneath the surface, everything felt strangely hollow. He was a well-known heart specialist in Vancouver, admired for his skill and professional calmness. His colleagues respected him, and his patients trusted him without hesitation. At home, he shared a comfortable life with his wife, Emma, who managed a small interior design studio. Their house was neat, warm, and filled with small touches that showed Emma's creativity. Friends often described them as a model couple, steady and balanced. Despite this, Ryan woke up each morning with a quiet sense of restlessness. His routine felt predictable, almost mechanical. He left early, returned late, and spent most of his time buried in medical reports or research papers. Emma believed he was simply committed to his demanding career. She trusted him completely and never questioned his long hours or sudden late-night calls. The distance between them grew slowly, almost invisibly. Ryan noticed the silence at dinner, the way conversations faded before they truly began, and the steady loss of shared excitement. Emma tried to fill the gaps with weekend plans, home renovations, and small surprises, unaware that her efforts only reminded Ryan of how disconnected he felt. He told himself the problem was temporary, caused by stress or exhaustion, but deep down he sensed a larger emptiness he could not name. As the months passed, Ryan began seeking meaning outside his familiar routine. This search, though subtle at first, would eventually pull him into a series of choices that changed everything, long before he realized the danger hidden beneath them. The hospital had been struggling with staffing shortages for months, and the pressure on the medical team was becoming noticeable. When a new group of international nurses arrived, everyone felt a small sense of relief. Among them was Ananya Patel, who had traveled from India with years of ICU experience and an impressive record of precision under pressure. She was quiet but observant, learning the hospital systems faster than expected. Her calm focus made her stand out in an environment where stress was constant. Ryan first noticed her during a complicated procedure that required steady coordination. Ananya anticipated each step without needing instructions, moving with a confidence that immediately caught his attention. She never sought praise, yet her work never went unnoticed. Soon, other doctors began requesting her assistance as well, relying on her ability to keep situations stable even when chaos surrounded them. In the weeks that followed, Ananya adjusted to her new environment with remarkable ease. She stayed late to help reorganize patient charts, volunteered for difficult shifts, and often became the person nurses turned to when unexpected problems arose. Ryan found himself watching her from a distance, curious about the calm energy she carried even during emergencies. Their professional paths crossed more often as Ryan began assigning her to his cases, justifying it with her excellence. He told himself it was purely practical, yet he became aware of the subtle pull he felt whenever she entered a room. Without realizing it, a small shift had begun. A connection was forming, quiet and unnoticed by others, setting the first pieces of a larger, far more dangerous story into place. As the weeks turned into months, the boundary between professionalism and personal interest slowly thinned. Ryan and Ananya began spending more time together after long shifts, often under the pretense of reviewing patient cases or finalizing charts. These moments felt innocent at first, but the unspoken tension between them grew with every late evening they worked side by side. Ryan justified the closeness as mentorship, something harmless and temporary. Yet the comfort he felt in Ananya's presence was unlike anything he experienced at home. Ananya, on the other hand, interpreted his attention as genuine care. She admired his dedication, respected his expertise, and found a sense of belonging in the guidance he offered. Her life in Canada was still new and unfamiliar, and Ryan's steady presence filled the loneliness she tried hard to hide. What began as gratitude slowly shifted into deeper attachment, though she kept those feelings carefully tucked away. Their meetings gradually moved outside the hospital. Shared coffee breaks turned into dinners. Hospital corridors turned into private corners in quiet cafes. The secrecy added a thrill that neither acknowledged aloud, but neither tried to stop. Ryan told himself the relationship was something he could pull away from whenever he chose, believing he remained in control. Ananya thought their growing closeness was a sign that he cared for her in ways he could not express publicly. By the time they both realized how far things had gone, the affair was already woven into their daily lives. What started as a quiet connection had transformed into a hidden bond that neither of them was prepared to untangle. Ananya's life took a sudden and devastating turn the day she received the results from a routine occupational health screening. She had gone for the test without concern, expecting it to be another formality required by the hospital. When the results came back, the words on the report felt unreal. She was HIV positive. For several minutes she stared at the document, unable to process anything beyond the shock tightening her chest. Her mind raced through every possibility, every memory, every choice she had made since arriving in Canada. Nothing made sense except one conclusion she could not ignore. Her thoughts returned again and again to Ryan. He was the only person with whom she had shared such intimate closeness. The idea that he might have unknowingly or carelessly passed the infection to her grew stronger with each passing hour. Confusion slowly hardened into anger. She felt betrayed, misled, and abandoned in a foreign country where she had no family to support her. The trust she had built around him crumbled piece by piece, leaving her with a sense of humiliation she could not erase. As the days passed, her emotions shifted from despair to determination. She researched the illness obsessively, hoping for some explanation that pointed away from him, but every fact she read only fueled her resentment. The thought of confronting Ryan crossed her mind many times, yet the fear of hearing him deny responsibility held her back. Instead, she kept her silence and withdrew from him, watching him from a distance with eyes that no longer held admiration. In her loneliness, a new purpose began to take shape. She felt wronged in a way she believed could not be forgiven. What started as grief slowly transformed into a dangerous resolve she convinced herself was justice. Unseen by Ryan, the first seeds of her plan sprouted in the quiet corners of her troubled mind. Ananya's emotions settled into a cold, steady determination as she accepted the reality she believed Ryan had forced upon her. The sense of betrayal took root so deeply that she began to see revenge not as a choice, but as a necessary response to the pain she now carried. She could not erase the diagnosis, the fear, or the lonely nights spent imagining her future shrinking before her eyes. The only thing she felt she could control was the narrative of how this happened and what consequences should follow. Instead of confronting Ryan directly, she started observing him more closely. Every pattern, every habit, every vulnerability he showed at work became a piece of a darker puzzle she was assembling. She knew the hospital's systems well. She understood how patient files were stored, how test results were processed, and how small details could create enormous consequences if manipulated carefully. The knowledge she once used to save lives now became the foundation of a plan she believed would expose Ryan's carelessness and destroy the trust others placed in him. She spent late nights studying the hospital's digital infrastructure, mapping out which accounts held the most power and which logs were rarely checked. Her medical experience gave her insight into how evidence could be shaped to look authentic. She collected fragments of unused reports, altered timelines, and prepared anonymous complaints that pointed directly at Ryan's professional conduct. Each step was calculated to avoid suspicion. Importantly, she told no one. She carried out every action with the calm focus of someone convinced her mission was justified. The anger she once felt had cooled into a careful, methodical resolve. By the time her plan was fully formed in her mind, Ananya believed she had found the perfect way to make Ryan feel a fraction of the devastation she lived with each day. Rumors began drifting through the hospital even before the formal accusations reached the administration. Ryan sensed a shift in the atmosphere around him, a quiet tension in the way colleagues greeted him and a hesitation in how nurses approached his cases. What he did not yet know was that Ananya's carefully planted evidence had begun circulating through internal channels, raising doubts about his conduct. It started with questions about irregularities in blood sample handling, all linked to his login credentials. The discrepancies were small but alarming enough to trigger official concern. Within days, the situation escalated. Anonymous reports arrived at the supervisor's desks, each one supported by digital records, screenshots, and patient files that pointed to possible negligence. The claims were detailed and appeared consistent, as if compiled by someone who had monitored Ryan closely. Administrators opened an internal investigation, and the weight of suspicion fell heavily on him. Ryan tried to defend himself, but the evidence seemed undeniable. Files he had never accessed were traced to his account, medication logs tied to his shifts showed unexplained changes, and patient reports contained errors that threatened their safety. The hospital followed strict protocol. He was suspended pending further review. The news spread quickly, reaching local media outlets that reported the allegations with dramatic intensity. Headlines portrayed him as irresponsible, casting doubt on his years of respected work. Patients he had once helped began questioning their trust, and colleagues who had admired him now kept their distance. At home, Emma was stunned by how rapidly their world unraveled. She struggled to understand how her dependable husband could be accused of such serious misconduct. Ryan had no explanation, only confusion and mounting fear as more falsified documents surfaced. By the time he realized he was being targeted, his reputation had already suffered. The hospital's leadership decided that the growing confusion required outside expertise, so a digital forensics specialist was hired to examine the network from the ground up. The investigation began quietly, with every login, file access, and system change traced back through months of activity. While the administrators expected to find simple technical errors, the deeper the specialist dug, the more suspicious the pattern became. The irregularities tied to Ryan's account did not match his typical working habits. Accesses appeared during hours he was never on shift, and certain entries originated from devices he had never used. Attention soon turned to staff ID usage. Every hospital badge left a digital trail, including timestamps and door access logs. One particular ID, belonging to Ananya, showed movements that did not align with her assigned duties. She had entered restricted offices unrelated to her role and stayed for long periods after most staff had left. Security footage confirmed her presence in those areas on nights the manipulated files were altered. This evidence formed a silent chain linking her to the sabotage. As investigators pieced everything together, they also uncovered documents she had saved privately, including drafts of complaints and notes reflecting her growing resentment toward Ryan. Although none explicitly admitted her involvement, the combination of digital footprints and personal records painted a clear picture of intentional misconduct. When authorities arrived at her apartment with a warrant, they found it nearly empty. Drawers were cleared, personal documents were gone, and her phone was disconnected. Neighbors reported seeing her leave hurriedly days earlier. She had vanished before anyone realized she was the central figure in the unfolding scandal. The truth had finally surfaced, but the person responsible had slipped away, leaving behind only unanswered questions and the wreckage of Ryan's shattered reputation. Ryan was eventually cleared of all wrongdoing, but the damage had already seeped into every corner of his life. His reinstatement at the hospital came with polite apologies and formal statements, yet the atmosphere never returned to what it once had been. Colleagues approached him cautiously, unsure how much of the scandal to believe or forget. Patients who recognized his name from the news hesitated before requesting him, and some quietly transferred to other doctors. Even though the investigation proved he had been framed, suspicion lingered in subtle, persistent ways that he could not escape. At home, Emma tried to offer support, but the ordeal had carved a silent distance between them. She stood by him publicly, yet privately she struggled to understand how he had become entangled in such a dangerous situation. Their conversations grew shorter, their routines heavier, and the once warm rhythm of their lives faded into strained coexistence. Ryan carried guilt for everything his family had endured, even though he had been innocent. The stress left him worn, cautious, and far less certain of the world he once trusted. Meanwhile, the search for Ananya continued. Investigators tracked possible sightings in neighboring provinces, checked transportation records, and followed tips from people who claimed to recognize her. Every lead dissolved into another dead end. She had managed her disappearance with the same precision she used to craft her plan, leaving no trace strong enough to follow. The case became a lingering shadow within the hospital, a cautionary tale whispered among new staff. Files remained open, marked unresolved, with her name attached to unanswered questions. Ryan often wondered whether she would ever be found, not out of anger, but from a need to understand how a single hidden betrayal had spiraled so far beyond control. The story closed without closure, leaving everyone involved with the unsettling truth that some wounds never fully heal.